for about 10 minutes is going to be about the subject of data architecture and what does a data architect do to help design some data standards and models and guardrails, particularly in this part of their job, specific to this area of designing and the guardrails and the models. So this is a very interesting topic, so let us start by talking about designing these standards, particular standards. So understanding what it means to do this type of job. It involves a lot of understanding of the requirements of the organization, what is appropriate, what is good, and what is in the scope of the culture of what is needed. So designing these standards, models, and guardrails as a data architect in a particular place, perhaps the Information Commissioner's Office, may involve these types of roles in a particular place, or maybe in any other kind of organization as well. So let's just save that, and we have this correction here. And now the first thing is perhaps to understand the regulatory requirements. There's compliance, and there's things like data protection laws, the GDPR laws, understanding and being able to work in those guidelines, work with those guidelines, and to be able to govern the data that is being handled in the appropriate way according to those rules and those laws. So to be able to do that to a good enough standard as well. And if you are a kind of organization that needs to be exemplary, then you should perhaps show yourself to be beyond those rules, within those rules, with much capacity to spare. So things like privacy standards, and you will ensure when you come into your design to comply with a lot of privacy standards and best practices, such as, for example, working with people's data. What times do you get rid of that data? What do you hold as PII, and how do you organize it when people want to change their data? Things like that. And that's something that I've done in the past as well. We have separated our PII data, even not just documenting it and having it in the same place, but also just moving it into a separate place completely. So people who want to join into it have to deliberately make that join into that data to know that they're doing it. So that's for the analysts to know that all the way down the line, it's not just some laws that they have to go and look up, it's also something that they do and interact with daily as well. So there's a kind of more intrinsic kind of connection to it that you might say, that you might be able to relate to, that people might be able to relate to. Second is stakeholder engagement. So when you have interviews and workshops and things like this, then you're collaborating with maybe you're having some interviews to, not job interviews like perhaps what we're talking about, but perhaps more even things like talking to people and trying to understand from their point of view what they're doing so that it can help you with a particular project, that kind of an interview. And also workshops where you're working in conjunction with other people to be able to get through some problems, to understand some problems, and to work out some solutions, or work out some ideas, and work out perhaps even sometimes working out what the problem is. Collaborating with these stakeholders, and you might have to, these might be people who are in completely different departments who are around in this same organization, or even people from different organizations as well, in the legal departments, IT departments, data users, and they could be coming from a variety of different backgrounds as well. So you have to be able to gather these requirements and see what are the pain points for these people, what are the things that they do that could be maybe things that you see more efficiencies in, that they do, but they are tasks, but they don't seem to have some kinds of better ways of doing it. So understanding these business needs and seeing what they want to do, often they have a desire and perhaps why they can't do it. Maybe there are some difficult roadblockers that are out of their scope, out of their ability. So establishing then, also within these kinds of things, a kind of feedback. Feedback is something that is very important, something very useful when you start trying to solve something, trying to create something. Because when you create something, it's not just something that is going to be done the first time and everybody is happy. You just design it, you think of it, and out it pops, and then everybody's happy with it, and then it works perfectly forever. Because there's always an established continuous feedback loop. You have to establish those. There's always this process of improvement, continuous improvement. Even when you try to do something very, very simple, there are always things that people think, oh, well, that affects this. Even when you do something very small, it can affect some other things further on, down the line, very, very far away. So there's always this complete continuous refinement, and also keeping within that scope of getting into being in standard models and standards that are good enough, that are high enough, that, for example, keeping things without duplication, keeping data without duplication, trying to minimize duplication, trying to minimize null values and things like that. That's trying to increase the ability for people to check for those things and to be able to hold those things to account as they sometimes move away from the benchmark. And as you move away from the benchmark, then perhaps you can try to see, okay, there's something that's triggering there, and then I can try to make it as a higher priority to fix that kind of area and then bring it back into what we deem to be acceptable, and then it all fits inside a nice model as well, where things you don't have multiple sets of contacts, for example, contact first name, and then the phone numbers are all over the place. So that's the strength and the power of stakeholder engagement and the continuous necessity to keep the stakeholder engagement as well. And sometimes it's very difficult to do that. So we have some kind of cross-functional teams as well. So that's something that I find is very, very important, that I've been getting into and I've been helping the DNA team to get into as well, is these cross-functional teams across the technology. So not even across the whole organization, because that's something that's even further up and further more difficult. Even we're having difficulty within technology to have these discussions within ourselves, to understand within technology the different parts of technical department, what we are doing and where we are. This is something that has been championed or created, and sometimes often just failed because people just didn't want to carry it on, or they found a little involvement, a little excitement about doing it, and there's not much traction to carry it on. People found it a waste of time, but it is useful in that it just keeps people in the loop. Sometimes you're doing something and you don't know that you're doing something in data, and you don't know that the digital team is doing something else. And just having these bi-weekly, twice a week, no, once every 2 weeks. So by that I mean once every 2 weeks meetings with the other people, other representatives of other people in other departments. So in DNA, what we decided to do was, instead of just having always just one person, we had a rota of 4 people attending this meeting. So it's not too much of a burden as well. So it's very, very useful. And it's something that you do and it comes up, and I am the person who organizes it in data and analytics to just rotor it around to make it so that each person gets their turn to go and represent. And there's a little place where you can feedback, or if you don't want to, you can just feedback in the talk as well, in our meeting that we have with the DNA leaders. And so it is something that we are able to just participate in, and sometimes you will get more of an understanding of what is going on around with other people around you, especially in this workplace now when we're all working remotely. It's very difficult sometimes to just feel you're part of something, and it's you can just walk up to somebody and talk to somebody about something. It doesn't happen so often or so easily anymore in this kind of environment, so you have to create these spaces for stakeholder engagement, and that is how we have found that it is very, very useful. I found it very, very useful. In the past, I don't know, it's been come and gone. It's something that's come and gone, but something in the future, I hope that it will just carry on, even when I'm gone, because it's very useful and it ties some strings together for some people who are maybe, sometimes you're getting involved with a lot of people, but you're getting involved with a lot of people with within a particular project. Or you're getting very involved with a lot of people, but the person adjacent to you, who is also a manager, or who is also a small sub-team leader, or a small project leader, they're not getting involved. And maybe that can help them to understand things as well, because they may be just listening to one or two people to understand how things are. And then it just broadens out their circle, and it brings more information to more people, and then that enriches the whole understanding and the whole ability of the team to move forward. So that's what I have to say about points 1 and 2, really, about data architecture, and mostly stakeholder engagement, and understanding requirements as well. So thank you very much, and that's the end of today.